Never say no. Never say I cannot. As for you are infinite. All the power is within you. You can do anything and everything. With this best quote of Swami Vivekananda, hi everyone. I am B. Shobharani from the Department of Biology, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College. Hope you remember in my last session we started off with a new chapter 3, that is human reproduction. What did we learn in this chapter called human reproduction, my dear students? We learnt about what is human reproduction. As you learned that human beings are sexually reproducing viviparous dimorphic individuals. And we also learnt about the various events that takes place in sexual reproduction, namely gametogenesis, insemination, fertilization, formation followed by formation of blastocyst and the attachment of the blastocyst to the endometrium wall of the uterus, where we used a word called implantation. Implantation can also be called as pregnancy, then followed by parturition, which is nothing but the childbirth. Then we moved on to the study of the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system. Right. So in today's session of this chapter 3 called human reproduction, dear second PUC biology students, we will be learning about the remaining concepts of this chapter called human reproduction. Today's session, you will be studying about a very important event in sexual reproduction, that is gametogenesis, which is followed by the two types of process. One is called spermatogenesis, the other one is called oogenesis. So you will also be studying about the role of hormones for spermatogenesis. Then you will be studying about the structure of a sperm, then the various steps that are involved in the process of oogenesis and the differences between the spermatogenesis and oogenesis. So we'll move on to this first very important concept of this session called gametogenesis. Now, what is this gametogenesis? You have studied that in the previous session. Gametogenesis is a very important first event of sexual reproduction. The primary sex organ of the male, that is the testis, and the ovary of the female produces the gametes, namely the sperm and the ovum, by a process called gametogenesis. So what, in simple terms, if you want to define gametogenesis, what is gametogenesis? Gametogenesis is nothing but the process of formation of gametes in the gonads. What do you mean by gonads? The reproductive organs. What are the reproductive organs? For example, in male it is testis and in female it is ovary. Testis produces the male gamete called sperm and the ovary produces the female gamete called ova. So this process of formation of gametes, we use the word called gametogenesis. So what is gametogenesis, children, then? The process of formation of the gametes. What are the two gametes? That is the sperm and the ova. What are the gonads? The male gonad is the testis and the female gonad is the ovary, right? So what is the simple definition for gametogenesis? It is the process of formation of gametes in the gonads, namely the testis and the ovary. And this process called gametogenesis involves two very important types. What are the two very important types of gametogenesis? One is called spermatogenesis, the other one is called oogenesis. Spermatogenesis takes place in the testis of the male and oogenesis takes place in the ovary of the female. Now let us study one by one. First, let us concentrate on this very important process called spermatogenesis. So what is gametogenesis, children? Gametogenesis is nothing but the process of formation of gametes within the gonads. What are the two gonads? One is testis, which is called the male gonad, and ovary is the female gonad. So testis produces the male gamete called sperm and the ovary produces the female gamete called ova. So, and this process called gametogenesis includes two types. What are they? Spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Now let us study one by one, that is spermatogenesis. Now, what is this spermatogenesis? As you know, what is spermatogenesis? It is the process of formation of a sperm in the seminiferous tubules of the testis is called spermatogenesis. How do we define this word called spermatogenesis? It is the process of formation of the sperm, male gamete called sperm in the seminiferous tubule of the testis is called spermatogenesis. And this process called spermatogenesis involves certain phases. How do we divide these phases? We divide those phases into 4 phases. That is phase of multiplication, phase of growth, phase of maturation, followed by spermiogenesis and spermiation. Right? So what are the 4 phases are? Phase of multiplication, phase of growth and phase of maturation followed by spermiogenesis and spermiation. So what is phase of multiplication? As I said, the wall of the seminiferous tubule produces 2 type of cells. What are the 2 type of cells? One is called the gonial cells, which is also called as what? Sperm mother cell, and the other one is called Sertoli cells. Right. Now what is the function of these gonial cells? Gonial cells will later develop into sperms, that is the male gamete. Then what is the role played by Sertoli cells then? They provide nutrition, food to the gonial cells during spermatogenesis. Right. Here actually the diploid gonial cell will undergo repeated mitotic cell division. That is the sperm mother cell will undergo repeated mitotic cell division to form spermatogonia. Right. And this spermatogonia will enter into a next very important phase called phase of growth. So what happens in this phase of growth? In this phase, the diploid spermatogonia increases in size. How? Due to the accumulation of the nutritive materials in the cytoplasm, and the cell is now ready to undergo what? Meiosis, and that is called as the primary spermatocyte having 46 chromosomes. I repeat, what happens in this phase of growth? Here more in multiplication phase, more spermatogonia is formed. And what happens in this phase of growth? The diploid spermatogonia will increase in size. How does it increase in size? By the accumulation of the nutritive materials in the cytoplasm, and now it is ready to undergo what? Cell division, that is meiotic cell division, and it is called as what? Primary spermatocyte having 46 chromosomes. So that phase is called phase of growth. Now what happens in the phase of maturation? This secondary primary spermatocyte will undergo first meiotic division. So what happens in maturation phase? A very important phase in spermatogenesis. So this primary spermatocyte, diploid primary spermatocyte will undergo meiosis. As you know, meiosis is a reductional cell division where it is reduced from 2n to n, haploid, right? So this primary spermatocyte will undergo first meiotic division to produce secondary spermatocytes carrying how many chromosomes each? 23 chromosomes. Half of it, right? 23 chromosomes. That is, the primary spermatocyte will undergo first meiotic cell division to form 2 secondary spermatocytes, right? Now this secondary spermatocyte will undergo second meiotic division. There it was 2 secondary spermatocytes carrying, what is the chromosomal number? 23, right? And this secondary spermatocyte will undergo what? Meiosis 2 to produce 4 haploid cells. Here you can see 4 haploid cells where we use the word called spermatids carrying how many? 23 chromosomes each. So 4 haploid cells are produced at the end of spermatogenesis. Very, very important point to be noted. Now as I said, so after completion of these 3 phases, a very important process happens that is called spermiogenesis. What is the spermiogenesis? It is nothing but the transformation of the spermatid into sperms. So that phenomenon or morphogenesis will take place where the spermatids are converted into sperms, and that process of transformation of a spermatid into sperm is called spermiogenesis, right? So followed by spermiation. What is spermiation? So release of the matured sperm from the Sertoli cells to the seminiferous tubule is called spermiation. So what is spermiation? It is the release of the matured sperm from the Sertoli cells to the seminiferous tubule of the testis is called spermiation. Hope you have understood the very important steps in spermatogenesis. What is spermatogenesis, children? As you know, spermatogenesis is nothing but process of formation of a male gamete called sperm in the seminiferous tubule of the testis, which involves these 4 phases, right? What is this phase otherwise called? First phase is called phase of multiplication, phase of growth, phase of maturation, followed by spermiogenesis and spermiation. So what is phase of multiplication? I have already explained, as the wall of the seminiferous tubule contains 2 types of cells, that is one called gonial cells, the other one called Sertoli cells. Gonial cell will develop into what? The sperm, and the Sertoli cells will provide nourishment to the gonial cells during spermatogenesis, right? And here what happens actually? The spermatogonia will undergo repeated mitotic cell division to produce large number of spermatogonia. And this spermatogonia phase of growth, then in this second phase called growth phase or phase of growth, the diploid spermatogonia increases in size by the accumulation of the nutritive materials in the cytoplasm, and the cell is now ready to undergo what? The first meiotic division, and it is called as what? Primary spermatocyte, carrying what? 46, having only 46 chromosomes. And it enters the next very important phase called phase of maturation. So this primary spermatocyte will undergo first meiotic division to form 2 haploid cells, and those are called as secondary spermatocytes carrying 23 chromosomes. And these secondary spermatocytes will undergo second meiotic division to produce what? 4 cells, 4 haploid cells, where we use the word called spermatids, right? 4 haploid cells carrying what? 23 chromosomes. And this particular part, this particular event, you call it as what? Spermiogenesis. What is spermiogenesis? That is the process of transformation of spermatids into motile sperms. As you know, the sperms are motile, whereas ovum is stationary. So this whole process is called as spermatogenesis. Hope you have understood the very important process of spermatogenesis, and this is a very important part of this chapter. They will ask you to write about the process of spermatogenesis schematically. So you have to write this as schematic diagram. So here you can see the multiplication phase, the growth phase, the maturation phase, and as I said, this is the spermiogenesis. So this schematic representation for spermatogenesis is very important, children. Only practice makes you to understand as to what is the actual process of this spermatogenesis, right? So moving on to the next part, that is hormones, which are very much important for the process of spermatogenesis. As you know, there is a significant increase in the levels of GnRH. So what are the hormones involved here? That is the GnRH. How do you expand this GnRH, which is nothing but called gonadotrophin releasing hormone. This is also a very important thing, because which is asked for 1 mark question. Expand GnRH, right? What is GnRH? Gonadotrophin releasing hormone. What is this hormone? This is nothing but a hypothalamic hormone. Hormone produced by the hypothalamus. You know, it's an very important endocrine gland. So this GnRH, which is released by the hypothalamus, levels of GnRH acts on the anterior pituitary. You know, pituitary gland is called as what? Master gland, which is divided into 2 parts, anterior part and posterior part, or otherwise we use the word called adenohypophysis and neurohypophysis. Adenohypophysis produces the hormones of its own kind. Neurohypophysis doesn't produce the hormones of its own kind. Instead, it receives the hormones of the hypothalamus. Hence, the hormones of the posterior pituitary is called as neurohormones, particularly oxytocin and vasopressin. You might have heard about these 2 very important hormones, whereas as this oxytocin is called as the birth hormone, and vasopressin is very much important to regulate the water in the body, right? So this acts, this increased level of GnRH acts on the anterior pituitary, and due to this, this is stimulates the secretion of LH and FSH, right? So stimulates, so GnRH acts on anterior pituitary, due to which what is stimulated? That is, stimulates the secretion of LH and FSH. LH is what? LH is nothing but called luteinizing hormone, which is the hormone produced by the anterior pituitary. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. So these two very important hormones are produced by anterior pituitary. Who stimulates anterior pituitary? It is GnRH. Increased level of GnRH acts on anterior pituitary to secrete what? LH and FSH. Now this LH acts on Leydig cells. Hope you remember in my last session, what are Leydig cells? The interstitial cells that are formed in the interstitial spaces of the seminiferous tubule is called Leydig cell. What is so very important of Leydig cells? And this LH will act on Leydig cells and in turn stimulate the synthesis and secretion of a very important male hormone, which is called androgen. Androgen is the male hormone, and this androgen stimulates what? Spermatogenesis. So this in turn stimulates spermatogenesis. I repeat, increased level of GnRH. GnRH is a gonadotrophin releasing hormone, which is a hypothalamic hormone. This GnRH acts on what? Anterior pituitary. Is stimulated to produce what? LH and FSH. What is LH? Luteinizing hormone. What is FSH? FSH is the follicle stimulating hormone. What is the role played by LH? LH acts on Leydig cells, right? And in turn, Leydig cells synthesize and secrete what? Androgen. Androgen is a male hormone, right? And in turn, androgen stimulates what? Spermatogenesis. So this androgen is very, very much important for a very important process called spermatogenesis. Now, what is the role of FSH then? FSH acts on the Sertoli cells. Hope you all remember, the Sertoli cells provide nourishment to the gonial cells during spermatogenesis, and this Sertoli cells in turn stimulate to produce certain factors which will help in, so certain factors are secreted which will help in what we call it as spermiogenesis. What is spermiogenesis? It is nothing but transformation of spermatid into sperm. I repeat, children, what is the role played by FSH? What is the role played by LH? LH acts on Leydig cells. Leydig cells in turn synthesize what? Androgen. Androgen in turn act on what? Spermatogenesis. Stimulates the process of spermatogenesis. FSH acts on Sertoli cells. And in turn, Sertoli cells will produce certain factors. And what are these factors helping in? Helping in what? Spermiogenesis. What is spermiogenesis? It is a process of transformation of a spermatid into a motile sperm. So this is a very important concept of this chapter called human reproduction, which is asked in the exam. So what is the role of hormones played during the process of spermatogenesis? Hope you all have understood this concept. Moving on to the next slide. This is the structure, sectional view of a seminiferous tubule. This is a sectional view of a seminiferous tubule. Here you can see the sectional view of a seminiferous tubule. Here you can see the spermatogonia, Sertoli cells, and this spermatogonia will get converted into primary spermatocyte, primary into secondary, secondary into spermatid, and spermatid into spermatozoa, that is the sperm, right? So this is a very important diagram which is asked even in your exam. Hope you all remember I had told you all diagrams in biology are very, very important. So all the diagrams that is given in the NCERT textbook is very, very important. You have to draw the diagrams that is given in the NCERT diagram properly. Then only you will be awarded marks. So diagram, for example, I told you in my last session, the diagram of male reproductive system and the diagram of female reproductive system is very, very important, children. Right? It is asked for 5 marks. Moving on to the structure of a sperm. Right? Through the process of spermatogenesis, sperm is formed. What is a sperm then? A sperm is a motile haploid gamete produced in the seminiferous tubule of a testis. So what is a sperm? Sperm is a motile, right, and a haploid male gamete. Where is it produced? In the seminiferous tubule of the testis. And structure of a sperm. First, let us understand important parts of a sperm are head, a small neck, a middle piece and a tail for motility. You remember I told you all sperm is motile whereas ovum is non-motile, or it is stationary, right? For the motility of the sperm, this is very, very important, right? Now, as I said, what is a sperm? Sperm is a motile haploid male gamete produced in the seminiferous tubule of the testis. It is divided into how many parts? Actually, to be very frank, it is 3 parts. A very small neck is there. So, head, small neck, middle piece and a tail. And this is how the structure of a sperm looks. So, a sperm measures around 50 to 60 microns in length. So, what is the length of this sperm? 50 to 60 microns in length. And the whole of the sperm is divided into what? It is divided into head, that is a small neck, the middle piece and the tail. What are the parts of a sperm? It is divided into head, a small neck, a middle piece and a tail. And the whole sperm is covered by the plasma membrane. So, the plasma membrane envelops the whole sperm. I repeat. So, the sperm measures around 50 to 60 microns in length. And what are the important parts of a sperm? That is the head, neck, middle piece and a tail. Right? And the whole sperm is enveloped by what? By plasma membrane. And moving to the head region, the head consists of a elongated haploid nucleus. You can see here, this is a elongated haploid nucleus. Right? Head consists of what? An elongated haploid nucleus. And here you can see, children, the anterior part of the head is called as acrosome. This is a very, very important part of a sperm as it produces certain enzymes which will help in the process of fertilization. So, acrosome is nothing but a cap-like structure of the head region. So, the anterior part of the head region of the sperm is called acrosome. And what is the significance of acrosome? It produces certain lytic enzymes, and these enzymes are helping the sperm to penetrate the ovum during the process of fertilization, right? Now, moving on to the neck, a short neck and middle piece. What do you observe in this middle piece, children? Here you observe more number of mitochondrial cells. As you know, mitochondria is called as what? Powerhouse of the cell. So, when you say powerhouse of the cell, what is it producing? Energy. So, there are more number of mitochondrial cells in the middle piece means what do you mean by that? More energy. More energy for what? For the motility of the sperms. For the motility of the sperms. If the sperms fail to move, then definitely the process of fertilization will not take place. So, what is that which supplies energy for the motility of the sperms? It is nothing but the mitochondria. More number of mitochondrial cells means more supply of energy. For what? For the motility of the sperm. Hope you have understood the structure of a sperm. Let me again brief up as to what is the structure of a sperm. What is sperm, children? As I said, sperm is what? Sperm is a motile haploid male gamete produced in the seminiferous tubule of the testes. And as I said, the sperm, the total length is around 50 to 60 microns in length. And it consists of what? Head, neck, middle piece and a tail. And this is the head region, neck, middle piece and a tail. Now this head consists of what? An elongated haploid nucleus. Right? And the anterior part of the head is called, a cap-like structure is there, that is called as what? Acrosome. What is the function of acrosome? Acrosome particularly helps in the process of penetration in the ovum for fertilization, for penetration. Now, the middle piece contains what? More number of mitochondria. What is the function of mitochondria, children? The more the number of mitochondria, more will be the supply of energy. So this will provide more supply of energy for the motility of the sperms. So this is also a very important question which is asked in the board exam. Draw a neat label diagram of a sperm, right? Now moving on to the next very important concept called oogenesis. There we studied about spermatogenesis. Here we are going to study about a very important concept, that is a very important concept called oogenesis, right? Do you all remember I told you spermatogenesis is the process of formation of the male gamete called sperm in the seminiferous tubule of the testis, right? But that spermatogenesis begins after the male attains puberty, or it is initiated after the male attains puberty. But oogenesis is initiated in the embryonic development itself. In the embryonic development. So here, same like spermatogenesis, this also includes 3 phases. What are the 3 very important phases of oogenesis? One is called the multiplication phase, and the second one is called the growth phase, and the last one is called as the maturation phase. Now moving on to the next, first very important phase called multiplication phase. Oogenesis is initiated during the embryonic development itself. So during this embryonic development, we find that some of the diploid germinal cells will undergo repeated mitotic cell division to form what we call it as oogonial cells. Oogonial cells, or we use the word called egg mother cells. So during the process of fetal development, some of the diploid germinal cells will undergo repeated mitotic cell division to form what? Oogonial cells, or what we otherwise call it as egg cells, right? And no more oogonia are formed or destroyed after that formation. So this is a very important point to be noted. So this is how the first very important phase starts, and after that the next very important phase is the growth phase. Here you can see the oogonium, that is the primordial germ cell, will undergo repeated mitotic cell division to form what? More number of oogonia, right? And this second phase called growth phase will start only when the female attains puberty. What do you mean by puberty? The other word for puberty is what? Sexual maturity. Only when a female attains sexual maturity or puberty, then only she will come across this very important phase called growth phase. So here what happens in the growth phase? This diploid oogonial cells, which we otherwise, that is the primary oocyte, will start gaining the nutrients from the surrounding follicular cells, right? And this primary oocyte will undergo first meiotic division. Will undergo first meiotic division to form 2 unequal cells. One is called the secondary oocyte, the other one is called as the first polar body, right? So the primary oocyte will undergo first meiotic division, where it forms 2 unequal cells. One is called the secondary oocyte, the other one is called as the first polar body, right? And this first polar body will later disintegrate. A very important point to be noted, which you don't find this process of formation of polar body in the process of spermatogenesis, which you can also add it as a difference between spermatogenesis and oogenesis. And this secondary oocyte, which is haploid, as you know, the diploid is converted into haploid here, and this haploid secondary oocyte will undergo second meiotic division. Second meiotic division to form again what? 2 cells. One is the functional ovum, the other one is the second polar body. Now this second polar body will again disintegrate. So only one primary spermatocyte can produce only one ovum. Here you can see how that is the ovaries, the primordial germ cells, that is primary oocyte is 2N, and between birth and puberty, that is the prophase 1 of meiosis, it will stop. And during the puberty, as I said, FSH is very, very important. And this secondary oocyte, which is haploid, will undergo second meiotic division to produce what? One functional ovum, and the second polar body. As you know, the second polar body will disintegrate later. So this is all about the oogenesis. Hope you have understood what is oogenesis. Oogenesis is nothing but the process of formation of a female gamete. What is that female gamete called? Ova. And the process of formation of ova is called what? Ovulation, which is a very important stage in the menstrual cycle, which you are going to study it in the next session about what is menstrual cycle, what are the different stages of the menstrual cycle. This is one very important stage which the female will come across, and the process of formation of ova is called nothing but ovulation, right? What are the three very important phases we studied? That is multiplication phase, then the growth phase, then the maturation phase, right? So this schematic diagram is very, very important for you all children for the examination. So either spermatogenesis might be asked, the schematic diagram of spermatogenesis might be asked, or the schematic diagram of the oogenesis may be asked. So if you practice writing the schematic diagram, definitely you'll be able to score good marks in this particular chapter called human reproduction. And all the concepts what you have studied in the first chapter of your syllabus called reproduction in organism is definitely going to help you out to learn the other concepts of this chapter called human reproduction. Already you have come across gametogenesis, etc., etc., all that, right? So moving on to the last one. So this is how the section of our ovaries. Here you can see this is how the ovary is. The primary follicle will develop into a mature Graafian follicle. So the ova is produced here, and once the ova is completely developed ovum, then it ruptures. So here you can see the liberated ovum. So this is what called as what? Ovulation. And here you can see the corpus luteum. The leftover cells is called as corpus luteum, which is nothing but produces a hormone called progesterone, which is a female hormone. So this is also a very important diagram for your examination, which is asked. This is the sectional view of what? This is the sectional view of ovary with a matured Graafian follicle. Here you can see the matured Graafian follicle, a very, very important diagram for your examination. Moving on to the last part of this session, children. So we have studied about spermatogenesis and oogenesis, right? Now, if at all they ask the differences between spermatogenesis and oogenesis, it goes like this. So it takes place within the testes. As I said, it takes place in the seminiferous tubules of the testes. Here, where does it take place? It takes place within the ovary. Here in the testis, if spermatogenesis takes place in the testis, here it will take place in the ovary. And growth phase is insignificant, not too very long in case of spermatogenesis, but the growth phase is very, very significant in oogenesis. A very, very important point to be noted. Then at the end of spermatogenesis, 4 sperms are formed. Very, very important, right? Here 4 sperms are formed. Here only one ovum is, only one functional ovum is formed, right? Here polar bodies are not formed. As you have seen in spermatogenesis, did you come across the process of formation of polar bodies? No. Here you can see the process of formation of 2 polar bodies, the first polar body and the second polar body. Later they disintegrate. Then it begins at puberty only. So after a male attains puberty only, then the spermatogenesis begins. But what about oogenesis? I have told you in this session, it is initiated during the embryonic development stage of the female. So these are the very important differences between the spermatogenesis and oogenesis. So what is the first difference for spermatogenesis? It takes place within the testes. Here it takes place within the ovary. Growth phase is insignificant. Here growth phase is significant. Then at the end of process, 4 sperms are formed. Here only 1 ovum is formed, right? Here polar bodies are not formed. Here polar bodies are formed. And spermatogenesis begins after the male attains what? Puberty. Here This oogenesis is initiated where? During the embryonic developmental stage only, right? Still the baby is developing in the mother's womb, the ovary will undergo this process called oogenesis. So oogenesis is initiated in the embryonic development. Hope you all have understood the concepts of today's chapter, that is human reproduction. So what all you learn in this session? You learnt about gametogenesis. You know what is gametogenesis, right? And what are the two very important types of gametogenesis? That is spermatogenesis and oogenesis, right? Then you studied about the structure of a sperm. Then what is the role played by the different hormones for the process of spermatogenesis. And you also learnt about the differences between the spermatogenesis and oogenesis. So in my coming session, we'll be dealing about a next very important concept, that is called menstrual cycle, and the other concepts of this very important chapter called human reproduction. Hope I was clear with all the concepts of this very important chapter called human reproduction. So I'll be meeting you all in the coming session, children. Till then, goodbye and thank you.